Welcome to the Customer Smarts podcast, where you'll discover smarter ways to deliver customer experiences. I'm your host, Justin Stafford. Last year, Australians were scammed out of $2.7 billion. That's an insane amount of money. The scary thing is that scammers are innovating at a speed that authorities can't keep up with. And now they're using AI in scary new ways, like using AI to fake the voices of family members to scam people for money. Smart, well-educated people are now getting targeted and caught out. My guest in this episode, Tracy Hall, has a truly horrifying experience. Trace is an ex-client of mine when she was head of marketing at eBay. She is super smart and someone who I never would have thought would become victim to fraud that would rob her of her life savings. Her story was featured in the Channel 7 documentary King Con, The Life and Crimes of Hammish Mclaren, the podcast series with The Australian, Who the Hell is Hamish? And she's also written a book, The Last Victim, detailing her harrowing experience. She's now dedicating her time to helping prevent other Australians getting scammed, which is truly inspiring. So in this episode, we're going to dive into Tracy's unfortunate story, the $2.7 billion scamming industry you need to know more about, how scammers are using AI in scary new ways, and some advice on how to protect yourself. Welcome, Tracy. Thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
I'd like to start with your story to give the audience some context of what you went through, which is a horrible case of what's called, intimate fraud. Do you mind giving us an overview of what happened to you?
Sure. In early 2016, I had been separated from my husband for about a year, and I decided that I was ready to start dating again. So I went onto a dating app, as you do, and I swiped right on a man by the name of Max Tavita, and we started a relationship. We went out for 16 months. He lived in Bondi. He was a chief investment officer for a family office. And we had a very real and intimate and sort of long-term relationship over the course of that nearly year and a half. And it wasn't until one morning in mid-July 2017, actually, that I woke up to a Crime Stoppers video of an unidentified man being arrested outside of his Bondi Beach apartment. But of course, I knew without a shadow of a doubt that that man was my boyfriend, Max Tavita, except it wasn't Max Tavita. It was a man by the name of Hammish Mclaren, who happens to be one of Australia's most notorious conmen. And Hamish had stolen my life savings, which was $317,000. And in the process, I guess it's fair to say he stole my ability to trust as well.
Yeah, no doubt. That would have made it hard to trust people again after that, for sure. And were you able to recover any of that financial loss?
No, there's never been any money recovered. Through the investigation and the sentencing, there were 15 victims in Australia, and the amount lost was $7.6 million. So they were sort of the victims in Australia, and none of that money has been found in the process.
Yeah, it's pretty insane. I watched the Channel 7 documentary last night, and I still can't believe it happened to you, someone you know. It sounds like an insane story from a movie. Is that sort of what it feels like looking back?
Yeah, I mean, certainly when I think back on our relationship and the way that it was constructed, it was like a movie. You know, there were sets, there were scenes, there were characters that he created over a period of nearly a year and a half to have me believe that he was who he said he was, to the point where I thought he was the perfect person to invest my life savings for me. And, you know, things like there was just so much deceit. You know, there were Bloomberg monitors in his apartment. There were falsified documents. There was official letters in his letterbox made out to the name Max Tavita, which of course wasn't his name. There were people on the other end of the phone that I could hear about trades that he had placed on behalf of his clients. There was so much to the story that, it felt like it was a movie that he created to have me believe that, who he was. And, of course, when you don't suspect somebody and you think that they love you, you don't imagine that in the background they're also plotting to destroy you and steal your life savings. And then, of course, when the full story came out and I found out about all the other victims, it just got bigger. The movie got bigger because everybody had a different persona. No one else had Max DeVita. They might have had a barrister called Hamish, or a businessman, or just the amount of lies and deception that was carried on for a very, very long period of time is just, it's actually mind-blowing.
Yep. And when you look back in hindsight, were there some key tricks that he used to lure you into that position that I guess now that you've become more aware about scamming, the key things or levers that you look back and go, oh, they're the techniques that scammers use?
Yeah, my case is so extreme, and most people who get scammed or defrauded will not go through the extent of the experience that I had. Most people that get scammed never meet their perpetrator. It is this sort of person on the other end of a phone, or on the other end of, an internet connection, I guess, or through a text message or whatever. But the tricks are pretty similar, and the behaviors are pretty similar. And what they try and do is elicit an emotion to take them from a target to a victim. And that emotion might be excitement. I've got a great investment opportunity for you. Imagine what your future could look like. It could be fear. And we've seen those in the hey mum text messages. Hey mum, I've dropped my phone in the water. I need you to, send me some money or get this new phone or whatever. So you're fearful for the safety of your child, I guess, and you're trying to help them out. Or, for more of the older population, if you don't fill in these details or give us these details, then you won't have access to your online banking. So there's fear that someone might not have access to their money. So fear is a big one. And then, of course, love. Love is a huge emotion that elicits, a sense of security and trust, I guess. And once the victim are in these heightened emotional states, they can't access their logical thinking as well.
Yeah.
And so, therefore, information seems cloudy. In the case of love, you have your rose-colored glasses on. And we know when you're wearing rose-colored glasses, all the red flags are just flags. So, it's just, these are the tricks that they use. They create a sense of urgency.
Yep.
If you don't take this offer, it's going to pass, or someone else will come on, or, and they try and sort of get you while you're, in some ways vulnerable. So you kind of couple those heightened emotional states with what could be called situational vulnerability. And that may not be, being super lonely and looking for love and just taking the first person there. It could be you're an international, like you travel a lot internationally. It could be that you're a corporate executive and you've gone through 3 different time zones in the last week, and you get home and you're absolutely exhausted. With jet lag, and suddenly you get something through on your phone or an email, and your defenses are down. It could be that you have a health issue. It could be that you're going through a divorce. It could be a whole bunch of things that make you, vulnerable. And we're all vulnerable at different times in our lives. It's just part of the human condition. But what they do is they prey on these moments of vulnerability, as well as elicit these heightened emotions. So our logical thinking is actually very faulty during these moments.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. And it was such a horrible thing for you to go through. What have been the key things that have helped you move on from this? It must have taken quite some time.
It did. It's been 7 years now since Hamish was arrested, and it's fair to say that the first few years were really, really tough because, he took everything from me. 1 minute I was in a relationship, thought I was going to spend the rest of my life with this person. I thought I'd found my person. And the next I had to kind of come to terms with the fact that, I was grieving a relationship that never actually existed. Like, this person wasn't a real person. And so getting my head around that was really hard. And then I had to, practically put the pieces of my life back together financially, because he had convinced and groomed me to set up a self-managed super fund. So he took me through that whole process. It was all set up legitimately. It was in my name. I had all the documents. I transferred money out of my superannuation fund into the self-managed super fund. And he was going to invest that on my behalf in a trading account that was set up in my name. But what actually happened was it wasn't set up in my name, and that's where the money went. So I actually had to unwind a non-compliant superannuation fund. I was dealing with the police for weeks in relation to my relationship with him, my experience, all the documentation I had to provide for them. I was I was a single parent at the time. My daughter was just 6.5, and I had to get her to school every day and her activities and, carry on there. So I sort of made a decision very early on that there'd be no tears at the dinner table, and we would just press on. And I also had a job, and, you know, every piece of financial security had been taken away from me. I lost everything. I had nothing except my monthly income. And I think we were actually working together when this all went
really?
down, when I was at
Yeah,
eBay.
I couldn't,
And
I wouldn't have known.
yeah, and so I was working at eBay at the time, and I had a big team of people and a really demanding job. And, it was my only financial lifeline. And I just knew, like, I was so scared about losing my job. And if that had have happened, I really would have been, on my bones. And, so I doubled down on work and I just put everything into that. And, so it was a really, really, really tough time. And, then emotionally I was trying to unpick the relationship. And then, of course, the shame set in because once I realized what had happened, I was just so upset with myself. Like, how could this, like, I never thought it would be me. Like, I never imagined that something like this would happen to me. I've traveled the world. I come from a great family. I'm highly educated. I've got an incredible career. I've got great friends. Like, how did I let this happen? And so that kind of, that shame and that blame that I placed on myself was very, very intense during that time. And, my health suffered. I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep, I couldn't rest. I, you know, I really was very, very, I was sent upside down and sideways all at the same time.
Yeah.
So yeah, those first few years were really, really tough. But then I guess the healing really started when I spoke to Greg Bearup, the journalist from The Australian, and he wanted to just sort of talk about my story. And then we found out about all of the other victims. And with that, he sort of said, this is just so huge. I want to do a podcast. And he kind of got the go ahead to start investigating. And it was an investigative journalism piece. And in doing that, he uncovered so much information that I had no idea about. And so for me, knowing that there are other victims, knowing, the extent of Hamish's crimes and what he'd been up to for the better part of 20, 30 years, how global it was, like how many, much older, wiser, smarter business people that had been scammed than me, all of this information together really put it into perspective. And for me, I think, that's really where my healing began. And I got some professionals to help me. I had a lot of, psychology, like therapy help. I went and found a financial planner because I just couldn't trust myself to make the right decision.
Yeah.
And slowly but surely, I just sort of pulled myself out of the hole, I guess.
Yeah. Yeah. It's definitely the most insane story I've ever heard anyone I know go through. It's crazy. So yeah, amazing to get through that and carry on. And now you're on a mission to create awareness and prevent other Australians getting scammed, which I think's really inspiring. How much money is getting scammed out of people every year, and how many people is this actually affecting?
Yeah, a lot more than you'd think. So Australians last year lost $2.74 billion to
Wow.
scams and fraud.
Wow.
Billion bucks, right?
Yeah. And in
And there were
Australia, that's just
600,000
Australia.
report. That's just Australia. And here's another fun fact for you. 30% of scams and fraud are never reported.
Yeah, right. So
So
that goes back
one
to
in
that
three
shame
people
you were talking about.
Yeah, 100%. And I think it's a bunch of things, right? I think shame is a big one, like without a doubt. And part of me telling my story is to, release, well, not only at the time release my own self of shame, but like to release other people of their shame, just to
Yeah.
show that it really can happen to anyone. But there are other reasons, and I can fully appreciate them. There's reputational risk,
Yeah.
right? There's potential career damage. I know when I was considering talking or not talking to Greg Barrett from The Australian, I was very much thinking about the impact that this might have
Yeah.
on my career and my reputation, especially because my job was so important to me at
Yeah.
the time. My career's always been important to me, but I guess I didn't want people to think less of me because I had been through this, and that impact my ability to get a job in the future, or my job at the time, or whatever it might be. Reputational risk for people with higher profile, for example. A lot of people have experienced a lot of trauma
Yeah.
around their experience, and they don't want to relive it. They don't want it out in the open. They don't want the media to create salacious headlines about it. And I totally understand those as well. Like, I don't judge anyone who doesn't come forward. There are also people who just don't believe that anything will happen.
Yeah.
Like, what's the good of reporting? I've lost my money. Nothing's going to happen. The scammers are overseas. What's the point? What's the point of all the paperwork?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of reasons why people don't report. I actually believe that it's higher than 30%.
Yeah.
But that's the statistics that we get. Last year in Australia, here's another fun fact. I love data.
Yeah. Yeah. I know.
Love data. Here's another fun fact. So romance scams. So the top three scams. The biggest one is investment scams.
Yeah.
And the third one is romance scams. Obviously mine were a combination of both. But romance scams last year in Australia, $201 million was lost to romance scams. That's $23,000 an hour for the whole
Wow.
year.
Wow. And when you say
Like, it's
romance scams,
insane.
what would that be? Obviously not yours
It's
was the
like
next level.
someone reaching at so mine would be a romance scam. It also was an investment scam, but a romance scam. So when someone kind of connects with you, pretends to love you, and you send them money, you give
Yeah,
them
right.
money.
Yeah, yeah,
Or
okay.
under deceit or false pretense, they'll ask for money, or you'll give it to them.
Yeah.
So it's where you're in an intimate relationship, or there's that sort of element involved. So $23,000 an hour.
Yeah.
Like, by the time we finish this conversation, it'll be like nearly 50 grand
Yeah.
gone.
Yeah.
Because of someone believing someone loves them and trying to help them out.
Yeah. Yeah, that's insane. And can you give us an
Yeah.
idea of who this is happening to, or who's getting scammed? It's not just the vulnerable. They're also going after, I guess, smart, wealthy people too, right?
Well, yeah, the biggest group that we're seeing at the moment is our elderly population, so the over 65s. And, there's some obvious reasons for that. They're coming into their retirement. They're accessing their superannuation and have access to money. They've accumulated funds over the course of their lifetime and all of the hard work that they've done. And, they may not be as great with technology. So, they're just not up to speed in the sense of what's happening in this space. And the scammers and these tactics are getting more and more sophisticated. The technology that's been used is getting better by the second. And you have people like my mom, I guess, who really just isn't aware of she wouldn't know what a phishing email is, for example. She wouldn't know how to check a URL extension on an email address and see whether it's legitimate or not. And these are very, very basic things that we can teach these people, this part of our population who are financially vulnerable in this way, to protect themselves. I mean, we're lucky in corporate; we get our compliance training every year, and as much as it feels like a total ball ache at the time, right? You hate doing it, and you rush through it, and you just try and get your 80% pass mark, and I'm not embarrassed to admit that that was me when I was in corporate. And now I look back and I think, how bloody lucky were we to get that level of training to help protect us both personally and professionally. And so, there's those sort of things. But yeah, the over 65s, they're getting scammed out of the most amount of money, and they're reporting the most as well. So they're being targeted very, very heavily.
Yep. Yeah, they're very, I guess, almost trusting. I was actually chatting to my parents last night about this. So it's almost on us to help our parents understand in a way.
Yeah, 100%. And I kind of talk about, like, I feel like people my age, so, I'm in my late 40s now, like, we're the sandwich generation in the sense that we've got our parents who we're trying to help protect and encourage and educate. And then on the other hand, we've got sort of children, younger children or teenagers who, they're navigating their digital worlds as well. And whilst they're much more sophisticated with their technology awareness and their education, they don't always know that the person on the other end of the TikTok or the Snap is not actually who they say they are,
Yeah.
and sort of trying to educate them as well. There's so many simple resources, and I've got them all on my website that people can download because I'm just so passionate about educating people. And it's like, if you're not sure, just Google it. Go, "Hey mum, scam," or "Hey mum, text message." Put into Google and you will get your results very quickly. There's a domain lookup website where you can just put in a URL extension and you can see very quickly whether that URL is legitimate or not.
Yeah.
So that could counter some of the phishing attacks that we get. There is an advisors registry on ASIC. So if you're being advised by a financial advisor and you're not sure, even if you do feel like you're sure, just chuck in their name into this registry and make sure that they have what's called an AFSL, an Australian Financial Services License. And under that, you'll be able to see what they're actually qualified to advise you on. So if you're getting advice on your superannuation and they're not qualified to do that, that's actually illegal.
Yeah.
And that's a reason to kind of put your hand up and say, I'm not okay with this. So there's very, very, there's so many resources out there, and there's things you can do. It's just knowing what they are, having it all in one place, and accessing the resources that we do have available to us.
Yeah, I guess being aware is the first thing, and then knowing what the tools are. So I'll make sure I put a link to your website in the episode description, so people can get to it, because I think that'd be super helpful. Cool. Can you tell us a little bit more about the dark side? Previously, when we were chatting, you told me about scammer farms, which is truly horrifying.
It is. This is something that really upsets me, probably just as much as when I hear about retirees losing their life savings. That really upsets me. But this one is next level. It is essentially these compounds that have been set up in places like Southeast Asia. Myanmar is a region that these scammer compounds have been set up, and there are hundreds of thousands of people working out of these compounds. Now, these people have often been brought there under false employment pretense and actually become victims themselves. They're sort of imprisoned in these compounds in a sense, and KPI'd and tasked to reach their targets of scams in terms of dollar value. And if they don't reach their targets or their KPIs, they get tortured. So the story in itself, from a kind of a human trafficking point of view, is just heartbreaking. But what they have done is they've set up these compounds, or these scammer businesses, I guess you could say, where they have the technology, they have the resources, they have the people to essentially scam the world out of trillions and trillions of dollars. And it's said that the technology in terms of the AI, which is the really scary place that it's going at the moment. The reports is that the AI technology coming out of these scammer compounds is 2 years ahead of any government agency in the world.
Yeah,
So
that's crazy.
the fact is they're just, they're moving at such an incredible pace. And when you think about how we counter these types of threats as a country and as a community, as a society, we are relying on our government. We are relying on our banks, our telcos, our payment platforms. And because I'm so deep in this space at the moment, I can tell you they're all trying really, really, really hard to solve this. They really are. And there's some great technology that's been put in place. There's some great initiatives. The government is working on a collective mandatory anti-scams code, a mandatory scams code. The telcos have something in place that means they all kind of adhere to this code. So they are working really hard. The education is out there. They are not sitting on their hands. But the truth is that these scammer compounds and these scammer farms and the technology and the people and the resources that they have available to them are moving 10 times faster. And we know that banks and governments and, other big organizations aren't known for their speed. They're not known for their agility. And it doesn't matter how hard they're trying. The bad guys, if you want to call it like that, they're moving faster.
Yeah.
So that is a concern. That is a massive concern. And when you start to look at the AI scams that are kind of hitting the streets now, that's where I start to get really scared.
Yeah. Yeah, that was going to be my next question. What are some of the examples you're seeing of the new AI scams? I've seen a couple of the deep fake type of things. They're really, it's terrifying because it's so realistic.
Yeah, I mean, there was one story I heard where, grown-up son calls dad and says, "I'm in a spot of bother. I need some money. Can you please transfer it to this account?" Now, the conversation sounds like son, acts like son, uses words like son, but in fact, the son was a deep faked voice that had been scraped off the internet and kind of, a scammer was talking, having a conversation, but it sounded like the son. And, the dad lost a bunch of money to that. We've seen those, I have, but there are examples of where video conference calls have happened where, essentially it's a room full of people that look like people that you work with, but they're actually video interpretations of people and it's been run by scammers. So, it's very, very difficult in a sense to ascertain what is real and what is not, to the point where I've had friends say to their parents, unless I am in a room with you asking you for money, you do not give anyone that looks like me, sounds like me, acts like me, anything, because you just can't be sure that it's true. And there's these sort of, I think we've all probably seen these ones. These are these celebrity impersonation deepfake AIs.
Yeah.
So you've got, the Twiggy Forrests or the Gina Reinhardts. You've got the Dick Smith, the Koshies, that essentially have been deepfaked, videoed, and they're spruiking investment opportunities, which, again, it's built on kind of the trust that people have in these celebrity characters, as well as the excitement. There's the emotion of this opportunity that someone's going to impart some knowledge on them that is going to help them be more financially secure in their future, or whatever they're promising. And essentially, they put these ads on Facebook and Instagram, and thousands and thousands of Australians believe what they see, and they're losing millions of dollars.
So what can organizations do to better protect their customers? So each organization, in their own right, you've got the complexity of all the government and the big, I guess the banks and the telcos. What can each organization do better?
Well, I think it depends on the organization. It's using technology and figuring out a way to protect their customers before they actually get exposed. to a scam. And I know there are certain things that are happening, for example, Westpac, for example, have this new sort of AI technology, and it's fantastic. It essentially determines or identifies a potential scam payment before it's actually sent. So if it's identified as a potential scam payment, they'll send you through, are you sure? Have you double checked this? Often they'll get a phone call. So there's a lot of those things happening. So there's ways that companies can use technology. I know the telcos are really cracking down on the ability to kind of, I'm not sure what the word is, but like when they, like a vanity number.
Yeah.
So it'll be a number and it will come up when they call you as Westpac Bank, for example.
Yeah.
And it's not Westpac Bank. It's a scammer calling. So I think there are things that the telcos are doing in that space. So each individually, when you look at this sort of where they sit in the experience of being scammed, what they can each do from a technical perspective. Of course, they've got their own policies and procedures. There are codes that sit across the industry. The telco industry, for example, they're working on a banking mandatory code. So there are those kind of things. Obviously education is huge because it is one of the things that it's one of our biggest one of the biggest things we can control is how well people are educated. And unfortunately, humans are our most vulnerable target. Technology can kind of catch a lot of it. But once you get to a human, you're dealing with emotion and non-logical thinking and vulnerability and a whole bunch of different things. So I think education is huge, and it's not only the companies educating us, and for anyone that sort of reads the emails that they get from their banks or their payment platforms, not a week goes by when you don't get one about scams, or you log onto your internet banking and there's a big warning sign there. So the education piece is huge, but I do think there's a level of agency that we need to take ourselves as consumers and educate ourselves. And I do understand that it's hard and it takes time and we're busy and we've got a lot on our plates, but losing money is devastating, and we work so hard for our money, and with the cost of living as it is right now, and people sort of really, any amount of money lost is devastating. It's not necessary. So I think there is onus on consumer to educate yourself, make sure that you're across these things. If you're not sure, double check.
And you're doing some work yourself with organizations, doing some public speaking and helping, create awareness. Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I mean, it's my full-time job now. So after my experience, and only just recently published a book about my experience, and the whole intention behind that was really to educate people on how this happens. It's very difficult to describe the insidious nature of this type of fraud in a 2-minute sound clip on the morning news or a very small newspaper article. And that's why I love doing podcasts, because you can actually have a really lengthy conversation. So in terms of writing the book, I felt like I needed 80,000 words to describe how this happens, because I do think it's very easy for these sort of clickbaity, salacious headlines of evil love scam, and it's this picture that you have in your brain of a lonely middle-aged woman sitting in a lounge room looking for love on the internet, and suddenly she's sending all her money to her African prince. And you look at those stories and you just go, that would never happen to me. And I honestly, I was one of those people. I never thought, I would never do that.
And I never thought, knowing you, I wouldn't have thought it would happen to you either.
No, and most of us don't. Most of us would look at that and we'd brush past it and we'd take no notice or think, oh, what an idiot. And in the same way, if Hamish had have knocked on my door 2 weeks after we met and said, Trace, give me all your superannuation, give me all your savings, give me all your share profits, and I'm going to invest that for you. And off he goes. I mean, I would never have done that. Of course, I would go bugger off. I don't even know who you are.
Yeah.
And yet he weaseled his way into my life. He, it is in a sense a way to describe how grooming and coercive control works, right? Because they're leveraging emotion and they're leveraging relationship for their own financial gain. And it was not one conversation. It was the hundreds of conversations. It was not one document. It was the hundreds of documents I saw. It was the death by 1,000 cuts that got me to a point where I was very happy to hand over my life savings. And this is the playbook that they work to, right? And so I felt so passionate to tell this story in a way that fully explained the way in which these things happen, so that for the people like me who thought it would never happen to them, that it shows a very, very real and authentic story of somebody who it happened to and the way in which it happened. And so that's why I wrote the book, and that is why I talk about it now, because I think, if it can happen to me, it can happen to anyone. And I have decided to kind of, I guess own the story and own the experience that happened to me, in the hope that it will educate and help others not to go through what I went through. And, for me, that's really important, because it has to mean something. Like you can't just go through something like this and for it not to mean something, It has to be worth something. And what I know is that in telling this story and doing the podcast, 5 years ago, the amount of people who have come to me, reached out to me either on email or Instagram or LinkedIn or personally, and said, they've told me their stories of scams and fraud, and, that happened to me or that happened to my parents. And these are people, honestly, Justin, that have been in my life for nearly 17, 18, 20 years.
Yeah.
And after it happened to me and I started talking about it publicly, they felt comfortable enough to come and talk to me and tell me what had happened to them. And some of them complete strangers, of course, and the stories are horrific. But some of these people I've known for many, many, many years. And I just looked at it and I said, how is it we've never had this conversation before?
Yeah.
How is it that I didn't know this about your family? And mostly it's like, oh, we just don't talk about it, or it's in the past, we've put it behind us. And I wondered in those moments where, if we do talk about it more and we have more discussion about this, and it is about money, and sometimes money is a bit of an icky conversation, it's a bit awkward. And if I can take those things away so that people feel more comfortable to have these conversations, and there's more awareness that these things actually do happen to more people than you think, then surely that's got to do some good. So yeah, you're right. I mean, I wrote the book, I published the book in May, and now I spend all my time going around to corporate organizations, conferences, and doing keynotes and workshops and panels, and really just trying to educate people on what is happening in this space and how they can protect themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. Awesome. Well, yeah, it's amazing what you're doing. Where can you buy the book?
Oh, any good bookstore. Amazon's a great place to get it. It'll arrive in a day or so. But Big W have them, all the major, like Dimmicks, all the major bookstores. But just do a Google and you'll find one.
Yeah. Yeah, it's called The Last Victim. And
it's an audio book as well. You can listen to me. You can listen to me drone on for 6.5 hours in the audiobook if you're up for it.
No, your sultry tones, Trace,
Oh my God, my real Aussie twang. I don't know. It was so hard recording that.
Yeah, well, I'll put a link in the episode description as well to your website, so people can find it there as well.
Yeah.
Well, unfortunately, it's time to wrap up. Thanks so much for sharing your story, Trace. I think
No
it's
worries.
truly inspiring how you've flipped your scenario on its head and you're now helping others. So thanks so much for coming on and joining me.
Thanks so much for having me. Thank you for continuing to shine the light on this very important topic.
Thanks for tuning in for a truly eye-opening episode. If you found this insightful, make sure you hit the subscribe or follow button now, as we have some great episodes coming up. And if you have any questions or would like to chat, reach out to us at customersmarts.co. Catch you next time.